Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Class is back in session, and today we are in my office, my normal work environment that I normally talk about poop. You can see poop on the screen, and it is fitting because today we are talking about the Dookie creators, the leaders, the saviors of pop punk, and that is Green Day. So we are taking a little bit of a detour from our emo conversations. We've already gone into the history of pop punk and how it kind of overlaps, intersects with the emo space. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet and you're wondering why we're intersecting into the pop punk space, please do. I know it's one of the biggest frustrations of die-hard like emo fans. But unfortunately, in the year 2025, the emo umbrella encompasses pop punk, post-punk, hardcore, all sorts of subgenres within this punk, post-punk scene where emo also fit in. And this podcast, School of Emo, sounds way better than School of Alternative Post-Punk Era Music. So we are going to lean into that. And if you hate it, I am sorry. But I don't think that you're going to hate today's episode because truly, like, how can you not love Green Day? And if you don't love their music, at least respect the legends that they are and also their legacy within the music scene and in this kind of alternative Warped Tour 2000 space that many of us have thoroughly enjoyed and gotten value from. I myself, I've said it a million times, I am very much a pop punk girly, even more than an emo girly, and evidenced by how I dress, my style, what I'm really driven by. And so I am a huge fan of Green Day, and I'm excited to talk to them or talk about them. I wish I was talking to them. If I was talking to Billie Joe Armstrong, I would be a basket case right now, but I'm not. I'm talking about them. And we are going to take it all the way back to 1987 and something I honestly did not know until prepping for this episode because I was born in 92. So I wasn't around for the height of Green Day. I came along to Green Day later. I enjoyed the legacy of Green Day and the bands that they inspired whenever I was younger. But going back into the 80s, Green Day was not originally Green Day. It was actually Sweet Children. And it was Billie Joe Armstrong and Mike Dirnt that were teenagers in Rodeo, California, playing in clubs which were inspired by the local punk scene centered around 924 Gilman Street in Berkeley, which was a DIY volunteer run venue that would then become legendary in the punk space. So very much in this kind of underground punk scene. We've talked about this with a lot of the emo bands. The 80s were an underground time, and punk, especially all versions of punk, were very much underground during that time. So they were playing as Sweet Children. And then by 1989, they had drummer Al Sobrante and then changed their name to Green Day. So they became kind of a trio and adjusted their name. I didn't know this either, but it was a slang term at the time, which just referenced their love of cannabis. Which kind of makes sense, but it's interesting. And maybe I'm just naive and a little dumb for not knowing that, but that was why it was there. So by 1990, we're entering the 90s, a year later, Al, the drummer, left. And that is where we got the legendary, the one and only Trey Cool, which began to kind of finalize and cement the lineup that we know of today. It is impressive. I'm jumping ahead a bit, but it is impressive that the band has stayed together as this trio for this long, over 2 decades, and not a huge amount of like they didn't really break up. Like we're not going to get into any of that. They will face their own controversies along the way. But being able to have a trio like this that I'm sure encountered a lot of drama within themselves, but was able to stay together, like that is a big deal. They're not brothers, they're not family. They are literally just a band committed to each other, and that is really impressive. So very interesting. And I'm so glad that Trey Cool was part of it. I have no idea who Al Bronte is. I don't know of the Green Day before what we know with even Dookie and what we're about to talk about. But if you do, please comment because I'm interested in what you thought about that. But I think Trey Cool, I mean, he is Billy Joe Armstrong. I mean, I feel bad for Mike actually because he probably gets thought of less, but all three of them honestly are such icons. But Trey Cool is a huge icon, and definitely perfect for this punk to pop punk journey that they were on. So in the 90s, their first records that they produced were 39 Smooth, The Slappy, and then 1000 Hours, all EPs. And these came out under Lookout Records at the time, which was an independent punk label working with a lot of the punk kind of underground bands at that time. Their 1991 album, so they had all those EPs, then they produced their first big album, Kerplunk, which sold pretty well in the underground. And that was sort of the catalyst of their initial success that they were seeing. So they were able to sell tens of thousands of copies in the underground scene, which was huge when we looked at DIY punk releases of that time. Again, we're looking at the early 90s, pre-internet access, like even being able to download music online and pre-MySpace, like, right, this is pre-Dashboard Confessional, sharing it, DIYing it in that space. This was a huge deal to be able to be underground, be part of this DIY ethos of the punk scene, and be able to move an album to this degree, especially for a fairly young band. They've been around, they put some work in, but they were still fairly young at the time, and they were just hustling and making it work, which is impressive. So big deal. But this is where the controversy started because they had this catalyst, they had some success, and they made the decision to then sign with a major label, Reprise Records, in 1993. So many in the Gilman Street community in this punk underground scene labeled them as sellouts. They turned their backs on them. Some fans saw it as a betrayal of punk ethics, and Green Day were even banned from playing at Gilman for years after this. Now, why is that such a big deal? Because we look at that today and it's like, well, they were doing what they needed to survive. Like we have their music, we have access to them now. Like in today's world, a DIY, like it's possible, but the goal is usually to link up with a successful movement, a company ideally that treats an artist well and helps with their success. But early on, like that was the only way to really get big success, mainstream success, which is where you get paid. But why was this such a big deal at that time? So if we look back at punk roots, looking at the 1970s, so punk roots in the US, there was a strong belief in creating and distributing music independently, bypassing some of the traditional industry gatekeepers and staying underground. So recording in unconventional settings, releasing music from independent labels, and even self-releasing, building fan bases through grassroots efforts like fanzines and the live shows in those non-traditional venues. That was all that punk really was. And it makes sense, right? If it's against the mainstream, the idea was letting art be art, but almost handicapping themselves a bit to do it one certain way in the gatekeeping like within that. So the goal was authenticity over commercialism. So mainstream labels at the time were perceived as being driven by profit and compromising artistic integrity. That hasn't necessarily changed, right? That is the biggest, I guess, caveat to taking that route. And then even the cost of mainstream success is sometimes having to bend a little bit to what other people want to be successful in those environments. Whereas punk and the scene as a whole valued raw, unpolished sounds and genuine expression over everything else, seeing major label deals as a potential path to selling out and losing their artistic voice. Becoming a sellout was one of the worst, I guess, disses that you could get in this scene at the time, which had translated to, the emo space. I think that's one of the biggest issues with like emo versus pop punk, the whole like poser kind of thing, even though we're all sort of part of the same community with the same goals and the same love of art and music. It's again almost sort of like a handicap that has been put on by the scene on themselves. But punk's anti establishment stance extended to the corporate structures of the industry, and many punks viewed major labels as part of the system that they were rebelling against. So, seeing Green Day step out of the DIY space to join a major record put kind of a enemy target on their back, where it felt like it was a betrayal to the scene. And now they couldn't, like, again, they would be a sellout in the way if they were to support them at the time. Fortunately and unfortunately, I guess whoever side you're on, the risk and the gamble that Green Day took paid off massively, because in 1994, with Reprise Records, we got Dookie, which changed the world of music. It altered the future for pop punk and changed the lives of Green Day, and was instantly a success. So this is where we got songs like Longview, Basket Case, When I Come Around. These catapulted the band into MTV and into the mainstream. Now, this is mid 90s. This is where, again, the internet was starting to take off. MTV was huge, TRL. Remember, music videos. We talked about this with so many of the bands around this time that saw success. This was kind of the rise and height of that success. And bands that made it around this time have continued to be successful, some even more than others, depending on how much commercial success they were able to have. And Dookie had a lot, despite its very ridiculous, very silly name. So they brought punk to the suburbs, literally. Literally. Suddenly, every kid with spiked hair, ripped jeans, and a cheap guitar were starting a band. Green Day were not just making music, they were shaping culture and starting a movement for many to fall in their footsteps. But it didn't come without backlash. Just like with signing to Reprise Records, critics were saying that they were watered down punk. Older punks dismissed them as bubblegum. But for millions of kids, Dookie was the gateway to punk and alternative music. It was more accessible, and it was kind of silly, but also fun, and also still deep, kind of like some of the emo bands of the 90s were compared to what we saw in the 80s. Looking particularly at the punk community from their home area, so the East Bay area, they viewed the mainstream success of the band and a Grammy, because they did win a Grammy into 1994 for the album as best alternative album. They sold over 20 million copies, like tens of thousands underground to their first major record, to 20 million and a Grammy. Some people work decades to get a Grammy. Like, it's wild. But because of that, there was more hostility from the community that they came out of, which is so unfortunate, because they really were opening a door for many bands in that space. But again, sticking to these hardcore values of anti-establishment, sticking to DIY ethos, like, it kept a lot of that space in that community from supporting and championing and celebrating the success that Green Day was seeing, even if they weren't necessarily changing, because the lyrics and the music they put out was still aligned a lot with the punk values, but it was not accepted because of how it was perceived. So the live shows, infamous. So we had mud fights at Woodstock 94, to Billy Joe dropping his pants mid-set during the festival. Green Day quickly became known for chaotic, funny, and rebellious performances, changing the scene and making their name there. So, as always, let's look at the lyrics of Basket Case, one of my favorite songs of all time, and honestly never goes out of style. It's a classic, truly. Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? I'm one of those melodramatic fools, neurotic to the bone, no doubt about it. Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me. It all keeps adding up. I think I'm cracking up. Am I just paranoid or am I just stoned? I went to a shrink to analyze my dreams. She said it's lack of sex that's bringing me down. I went to a whore. He said my life's a bore. So quit my whining because it's bringing her down. Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me. It all keeps adding up. I think I'm cracking up. Am I just paranoid? I don't know. Grasping to control. So I better hold on. Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me. It all keeps adding up. I think I'm cracking up. Or am I just paranoid? Or am I just stoned? So after Dookie, the band tried to evolve with a few albums that weren't quite received in the same way. The downside of hitting such massive success with your first big album release. So they had Insomniac in 1995, which was darker and heavier, maybe leaning back on their original roots after kind of proving themselves from the label's standpoint, possibly. They had Nimrod in 1997, which gave us the surprise ballad Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, which suddenly played at every prom, graduation, TV show montage. Let's look at the lyrics. Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end, it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hang it on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos of memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end, it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. After that, we got Warning in 2000, which leaned more into the pop and folk influences. So, again, trying something new. But by the early 2000s, after all of these albums were released, and even with Good Riddance in the mix, Green Day's popularity seemed to be fading. They were no longer the young punks of Dookie, and critics wondered if their best days were behind them. But just like Dookie hitting the scene, everything changed in 2004 when we got American Idiot. This was a full-blown rock opera style album that doubled as a furious critique of American politics and media in the George W. Bush era. So let's put ourselves back in this time, right? We talked about this with a lot of the bands around this time, especially when we looked at My Chemical Romance most recently. 2001, we had 9/11. A lot of the bands within this post-punk scene, whether it be the emo space, the pop punk space, were processing the collective trauma, frustration, doubt that we were going through. Remember, this is the first time in American political history, if you will, or just history in general, where not only were we dealing with a really big, massive shift in political ideas and thought with this fear of war and being enveloped in war, but we were also dealing with access to media, access to people's thoughts, access to all of what was going on. And so, as a collective generation that kind of grew up with this, we were faced with so much fear and uncertainty from what we were seeing. There were, I guess we could call it propaganda now, but political messages left and right, not like what we even see today, which is unfortunate that we haven't fixed this, but it was the start of it. And the generation that was raising a lot of us, or raising the generation even before me that was, truly in their 20s, like becoming adults during that age, that generation had gone through like the Great Depression, right? They weren't necessarily present and weren't necessarily known for helping their children and adults to follow to process the trauma that they were going through. And so we got, unfortunately, some of the best music around this time leaning into all of us trying to process what was going on. Gerard Way saw 9/11 happen from a ferry, and then we got everything that followed, bullets going into even the Black Parade years later. So a lot of music became highly political, but very specific, which again, the US just hadn't had fully, especially even in the punk space. Europe got it differently, right? The UK got it differently, but punk in the US was a little bit different, like anti-establishment when the establishment wasn't so bad, lots of air quotes here. But now there is a lot going on. There's a lot more division happening, and there are a lot more opinions about what our leaders in our country should and shouldn't be able to do, and how we were involved in war and the height of like racism, so many things going on. And that is where American Idiot fit in. So thinking about it in that era of time, this album could have either completely sunk Green Day, or what it ended up doing, putting them back into the spotlight of success. So this is the story of Jesus of Suburbia, a disillusioned anti-hero navigating suburban life, drugs, war, and identity. So it's kind of a concept album as well, sort of like the Black Parade, right? Is the story of the patient going into death, basically. This is Jesus of Suburbia trying to navigate life and this world that was, again, divided and thought to be naive. Suburban life is very different. As someone who grew up in rural South Arkansas, like I definitely understand like what you're seeing, the messages you're getting, groupthink, like, right, this is kind of an anti to that, and navigating some of that confusion and frustration that just was life at that time. So we got songs like Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Holiday, which dominated on the radio. And then the title track, American Idiot, became a generational anthem of protest. The album sold many millions, of course, and won multiple Grammys, and even inspired a Broadway musical also called American Idiot. This was directed by Michael Meyer, opened on Broadway in 2010 after a successful run at Berkeley Repertory Theater. It tells a story of three young men, Johnny, Toonie, and Will, who struggle to find meaning in a post 9/11 America. The show features music and lyrics by Green Day's Billie Joe Armstrong and includes the songs from American Idiot, as well as material from 21st Century Breakdown. The musical's narrative is primarily conveyed through songs rather than dialogue, creating a fast-paced, energetic experience. It explores themes of disillusionment, rebellion, and the search for identity. It also incorporates elements of pop punk with explosive choreography and powerful vocals. So bringing this kind of pop punk that was rising in the mid 2000s already in the mainstream media to Broadway and theater, which had elements of punk, right? There's art always encompasses that, like art and punk go hand in hand in a lot of ways. But being on Broadway and deep into the scene and having success was unique. This did receive critical acclaim, won 2 Tony Awards, including the Grammy for Best Musical Show Album. It also spawned national and international tours, and then a film adaptation has been discussed, but not yet materialized. So maybe now, with like the height of American Idiot coming back to the scene, because of more political unrest, division, frustrations by many people, including myself, out there. So for many fans, American Idiot was the Green Day that defined their teen years. It was like a reawakening, refreshing reconnection to the band. Punk wasn't just about rebellion anymore. It was also about resistance and finding your own identity in the midst of everything else around you, which is kind of where pop punk really starts to fit in. It's like a different level of resistance, more than just anti-establishment against the man kind of thing. So we have to look, of course, at the lyrics of American Idiot. Don't want to be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under a new mania. And can you hear the sound of hysteria? The subliminal mindfuck America. Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien nation, where everything isn't meant to be okay, and television dreams of tomorrow. We're not the ones who are meant to follow, for that's enough to argue Well, maybe I'm the faggot America. I'm not a part of a redneck agenda. Now everybody do the propaganda and sing along to the age of paranoia. Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien nation where everything isn't meant to be okay. And television dreams of tomorrow. We're not the ones who are meant to follow, for that's enough to argue. Don't want to be an American idiot. One nation controlled by the media. Information age of hysteria. It's calling out to idiot America. Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien nation where everything isn't meant to be okay and television dreams of tomorrow. We're not the ones who are meant to follow, for that's enough to argue. So after American Idiot, we did have more albums that followed. So 2009, we had 21st Century Breakdown, similar to American Idiot. We had three different albums, kind of produced a little bit like EPs, but they were sort of a trilogy of full albums called Uno, Dos, and Tre, like Trey Cool. And those were all released in 2012. And that was meant to be more energetic, kind of more of their original work. They had a full demo album, so full of demo songs called Demolicious in 2014. Revolution Radio, full album in 2016. Father of All Mother Effers in 2020. No More Bad Mondays, also in 2020. And then Saviors, their most recent album in 2024. In this, me being naive and not fully connected, I love Saviors, and we'll get into Dilemma, one of my favorite songs by them as well. I did not realize that was only 2024, which is impressive that that song is already so ingrained. Like I thought that that song had been around for a decade. I thought it was from American Idiot or Dookie or from some other point in time. I didn't fully realize that that's only been around since 2024, which I think shows how connected some of their music can be to other parts of their discography, but they also do try new things, and sometimes it succeeds and sometimes it doesn't. Truthfully, Dilemma is a hit from 2024, but they are still defined by Dookie and American Idiot. They've leaned into it as they should as artists and musicians, because that is where a lot of the money is versus some other albums. But with that, they have never stopped creating, producing music, being creative, and sticking together as a band. With that, they still have had controversy along the way. So the biggest one being those sellout accusations that followed them for years early on in their career. Kind of pushing through that and not letting that deter them is a big deal. I'm sure they had great people in their ears at the time. Maybe they were truly motivated by the money, which honestly, no shame. We're all trying to make ends meet and have success in our lives, and that's okay. They had a lot of negative thoughts and opinions and still continue to get a lot of backlash. And I'm sure even on scary levels of the political stance that they've made on American Idiot. Some have hailed them as brave for some of the statements that they've made, while others have told and continue to tell them just to shut up and play music. They don't belong in politics. We're seeing that all again as they took American Idiot and changed the lyrics. Instead of don't want to be part of a redneck agenda, they've changed it to don't want to be part of a MAGA agenda with Donald Trump starting in 2020, or probably even before that. So that's been really interesting to see play out. And even I had this long discussion with my husband recently about how there's so much negative talk still about bands in this kind of post-punk space, whether that be pop punk or true punk or even hardcore or emo. And there's such a discord on artists shouldn't be political. They shouldn't talk. They shouldn't make stances. When that is what all of this was from the very beginning. Art is political. It is communication. Again, punk is very much about resistance. And of course, we're going to see that. And it's very interesting that people still go to shows or say they're fans of music that they deeply don't agree with, based on how they criticize it. And it's like, how can you actually be a fan of the band and music that is so deeply connected to these other ideas that you are very against? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, but I also sometimes can think in a bit of black and white. And so it's interesting. It's interesting discord to continue to see, and they've been at the center of that since very early on in their career. There's also, like many bands around this time, addiction and recovery woven into the Green Day story, especially looking at Billy Joe Armstrong, who I love deeply. I would love to meet him in real life. He is a beautiful man and seems to have such a genuine heart and kindness towards people, but he has struggled along the way. So in 2012, Billy Joe had an infamous stage meltdown at the iHeartRadio festival. So he smashed his guitar and cursed out Justin Bieber, the height of Justin Bieber, and it made headlines for it. So he later checked into rehab, citing substance abuse. So where did that all begin? Likely had started earlier in their career. Again, a lot of bands who saw success around this time struggled. Even looking at the name Green Day, right? Drug use was part of that. So not a huge surprise that that would maybe escalate into other types of substances along the way. And dealing with the band stuck together, which is impressive. And they stayed true to their work and kept persevering through not so much success after a huge amount of success. But anytime a band is going through those highs and lows, they're in the industry, especially back then when there was not a lot of care put into artists. A lot of times substance abuse became part of that, which is really unfortunate. So that's part of their history. But after that 2012 incident, he did become sober for about 5 years, but then relapsed, feeling kind of this fear of missing out, which makes sense. Unfortunately, that is part of the scene. And I'm sure there's a lot of pressure that I will never understand in that realm and with that type of career. And so whenever he described falling back into old patterns of drinking and then experiencing physical and mental health issues, feeling like he was, his quote was messy. He then found a good group of sober friends, a community, and emphasizes the importance of support systems in his recovery. So he's been able to navigate that and find sobriety now, but really does lean on his relationships with his family, his happiness, and his ability to create music as the byproducts of that. So the motivation in staying sober. He also noted that he's able to enjoy social events now without alcohol, according to a Billboard interview that he did, which is a massive success for him. And probably some of that joy in, what we're seeing, I guess, from him in the 2020s and beyond. But going back to Saviors in 2024, one of the biggest hits is Dilemma. And this is thought to be his way of addressing his struggles with alcohol and his journey to sobriety. So he's made comments that the song is a very honest and straightforward reflection of his experiences. So let's look at the lyrics. Welcome to my problems. It's not an invitation. This is my dilemma, and it's my obsession. I was sober, now I'm drunk again. I'm in trouble and in love again. I don't want to be a dead man walking. I don't want to be a dead man walking. Welcome to my nightmare, where dreams go to disappear. Sit around in rehab, feeling like a lab rat. Strange days are here again, and it's getting weirder. Here's to all my problems. I just want to drink the poison. I was sober, now I'm drunk again. I'm in trouble and in love again. I don't want to be a dead man walking. I don't want to be a dead man walking. I was sober, now I'm drunk again. I'm in trouble and in love again. I don't want to be a dead man walking. I don't want to be a dead man walking. Oh, why? When I fall asleep tonight on the wing in a prayer. Oh, why? For despair and obsession on you. You, yeah. I was sober, now I'm drunk again. I'm in trouble and in love again. I don't want to be a dead man walking. I don't want to be a dead man walking. So through it all, the controversies, the substance issues, sobriety, all the struggles that come with fame, the band has stayed intact. They've weathered it all, and they continue to release new music and tour and give to their fans as well as their families, which is huge in this industry, and especially within this genre in the industry. So here are some of the kind of fan moments and some memorable moments for the band and punk spaces. One of them is how Billy Joe continues to lift up younger artists, and especially within shows, is known for pulling fans on stage to play guitar with them, some fans as young as age 10. He seems to be truly a champion of other artists and his fans being able to fully be engaged in the music, which is really nice to see. Tattoos, the idiot logo, lyrics, album art, all symbols of rebellion and belonging, widespread within the fan community. Very iconic, and again, have become even more iconic in the age that we're in right now. And then there are lots of fan theories. Even though the band has put out massive amounts of music, there are many fan theories about unreleased tracks and when those will come to the forefront. So that is ongoing discord between the fans about what hasn't been released, like with a lot of these bands, and when we might get it. And there's a lot of debate around that, which kind of keeps it fun and mysterious and engaging. But again, you can't really criticize Green Day because they do put out a ton of music, which again is very impressive to be able to do. And one of the most important fan moments was Green Day's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2015, where fans were able to celebrate their journey from Gilman Street outsiders to rock legends and the legacy they were able to leave. So, where are they now? What's going on with Green Day today? They're still going strong. Their newest record, Saviors, marked their 14th studio album. They continue to headline festivals, tour stadiums, and true to form, stir the pot with political commentary. We've talked about it. They are still there. They're still talking, interviews, like they are not holding back. They have a lot of power based on their position and the success they've already seen within the industry. And so that is really refreshing that they're using their voice with that power they hold, especially for younger artists and others who are facing some of the negative backlash from some of that communication. They did have their Saviors tour, which is a world tour that started in 2024 to promote the newest album while also celebrating the milestones for Dookie and American Idiot. And they played both of those albums in full. I was able to go to this tour, and this was my first time ever seeing Green Day. Incredible. Like one of the best shows I've ever been to. And again, I like Green Day. I'm a fan. I'm mostly a fan of what they created in the industry for bands that followed that became some of my favorites. But I'm not necessarily someone who is like a diehard fan. I haven't listened to all their music at all times. And I studied and kind of got prepared for this tour, but such an incredible show. Because they played both of those albums in full, they had full setups of the stage, like so much drama, and they had actors involved. They had like a little blimp thing like over the crowd, like they were throwing out stuff, and they came into the crowd running through. Like they did so much in like unique to each album, and each song had something to it. Huge production, the band members running on stage. Even Trey Cole had his own little performance when the other band members took a break after playing drums for hours. But it was, I think, like a 3 hour set, at least 2.5 hours, but engaging. I stood, sang every song, like super into it. Like it felt like it went by in 30 minutes. One of the best shows I've ever been to, and impressive. Like these are not young guys. They're not old, right? They're not young. And to see them perform with such energy and excitement, and again, the production, all of it, it was so good. I almost didn't go. And last minute, my husband and I bought tickets, and on our way driving to the stadium, we were like, maybe we can grab some tickets last minute, because I felt like I was missing out. I was like, I want to experience Green Day. It's been so long. And not only was Green Day amazing, Smashing Pumpkins opened for them. Like one of the openers, I think it was Rancid and Smashing Pumpkins, which was also an incredible set. And then Green Day. Some of the best money I've spent. It was amazing. And so if you are somewhere where they are doing this tour, I know it's kind of wrapping up probably, but you should go because it was so good and fun. Just so much fun, which was exciting to experience. But very cool. So that's happening. And then if we look at their influence and how that's continued to be, deeply woven into the scene today, it's undeniable. Like their legacy in the space. Of course, they were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like they are, I would call them the founders, the leaders of pop punk in the US for sure. Really, even anywhere. Because I think that probably did really start in the US. But undeniable. So without Green Day, the pop punk boom of the 2000s, bands like Blink-182, Fall Out Boy, even our best emo fun bands like My Chemical Romance, they probably wouldn't have exploded the way that they did because Green Day was able very quickly and very early to bridge the underground punk and mainstream success spaces, paving a way for emo and alternative scenes that we celebrate here and every single day. Like credit where credit is due, they deserve it. And again, you can't, whether you like their music or not, like you can't deny how much respect they deserve for their what they've created in this scene. Did they expect that that was going to happen? I don't know. I would love to sit down with all three members and ask that question of like what were they seeing? Like did they see what we have now today, even with the release of Dookie and their success there? Like or did they have no idea? Like, do they credit themselves for what they've been able to inspire, or are they just simply inspired by everything around them? I would love to know. I don't know that, but I have to imagine that there is a lot of deep gratitude. And I also have to imagine that bands constantly are probably thanking them if they meet them for their influence and the doors that they opened into the space. So that concludes today's class. Again, one of my favorites. I love Green Day. Maybe you're inspired to go listen to those big albums or maybe one of the lesser known albums. If you're like, you know what, I'm actually interested in exploring some of the other music because I've only been stuck on the two big albums. I hope you do. I hope you enjoy the music today and put a smile on your face, dance, have fun, and maybe even have some deeper conversations about some of the things happening in the world that the music very lightly and gently inspires you to have. We are going to continue a bit of our pop punk exploration the next few episodes as we prepare for my next concert, which is A Day to Remember featuring Yellowcard, one of my favorite bands of all time. And we will be going into a deep dive of both of those. Those are two that are probably wait, are they emo? Are they not? Why are they involved in the emo space? Like, what are they? Where do they fit in? So, we're going to talk about it and then get to uncover and reflect over that show. And then we're going to go into another controversial band, which is Sleep Token, melodic metal, new metal, whatever you want to call them. Do they fit into the emo world? Probably not. Maybe we'll go into it and explore that tour as well. One of my husband's favorite bands. So until then, go back and listen to some of the other episodes of the School of Emo. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a nice review. That will help. I would appreciate it. It means all the work I'm putting into this means something to someone else as well. And I'll see you in our next class.